You found yourself on another episode of Locked On Bulls. Are the Chicago Bulls trying to overcompensate for their previous failures at the trade deadline with being open to moving the majority of their roster? We'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, is Billy Donovan the guy, regardless of the next phase of the Chicago Bulls? Should he stay on as the Chicago Bulls head coach? We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Bulls.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. I'm Haize, host and creator of Chicago Bulls Central and Chicago Bears Central YouTube pages and podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Chicago Bulls sit in an interesting place, right, where they're trying to decide on the next phase of their roster, and they're quickly approaching that 35-game mark, about 14 games away from that mark, which at the start of the season was reported, right, as the mark where the Bulls will decide on what they want to do with their roster. Give it about 35 games into the season, and then they make a determination on if they're going to be trying to keep and prioritize keeping their top 10 pick and make moves on the roster to do so, and really give a chance for players to kind of show what they have, audition for other teams in a lot of ways. And then we start hearing things like it's not just Zach and Vooch who are both, playing well, having pretty darn good season and the thing, and when it's all said and done. But then also looking at, reportedly that they're open to moving Lonzo Ball, which when you combine those three players are about 45% of the Chicago Bulls salary cap. And so those would clearly be moves that would indicate that not only are you trying to clear salary out, right, but you're also, doing and making the moves. They're not necessarily outwardly tanking, but you are making the moves to kind of solidify your chances of keeping that top 10 protected pick that is owed to the San Antonio Spurs. Now, I've talked about it many times before. The Bulls really aren't that far off from keeping their top 10 pick. And so moving any one of those guys, well, either one of Vooch or Zach really kind of gets you closer to there. The Bulls right now are on pace percentage-wise to win 31 games. They have the point differential of typically between a 25 and 30 win team. And so when you look at that, 28 wins around where the Bulls are kind of expected to be, that would have been the 8th worst record in the NBA. So that really helps you keep your top 10 pick potentially, as long as you don't get unlucky in the lottery and teams behind you leapfrog you and push you further down. And so, the Bulls and where they sit now, and as a team that the offense is rocking. Like the Bulls offensively are towards the top of the league in three-point shooting attempts and percentage, right? We're towards the top of the league as far as points scored per game. We're the fastest team as far as pace. But the defense is really the thing that's holding that Chicago Bulls team back. And so, I personally, just my personal opinion, don't think the Bulls are going to have too much trouble being a bottom 10 team in this league. But of course, you want the front office may want to solidify that if they're going to be bad, they want to make sure that, hey, we want to make sure we're going to keep that top 10 pick, because the worst scenario really out there for the Bulls would be to be bad, have some misfortune in the lottery that ends you up giving up your pick, and you had a bad season on top of that. So, but the question then is, when you start hearing things like it's not just Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, it's Lonzo, even that they're opening to maybe moving Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu, right? Are the Bulls really trying to overcompensate for some of their previous failures at the trade deadline? Of course, people are still talking about how much the Bulls missed out on not moving Alex Caruso at the trade deadline last year, where reportedly you could have gotten multiple first-round picks, things like that. And the Bulls ultimately have really struck out on not deciding to move players while their values at the highest. You look at the Alex Caruso situation, which I just laid out, the Andre Drummond situation, where reportedly the Bulls got offered 2 second-round picks by the Philadelphia 76ers for Andre Drummond. He ends up going to the 76ers anyway in the offseason for nothing. You look at the DeMar DeRozan situation as well, end up getting a sign and trade back. You get Chris Duarte, a second-round pick, which is coming up this year. That's really all you got back for that. Had you, maybe at the trade deadline, maybe the year prior at the trade deadline, decided that you were going to go a different route with this roster, maybe could have gotten more back, right? And so now when you look at the Bulls, especially with Zach and Vooch playing great, you got Coby, you got Io on really good, reasonable deals, which could get you more net back. I'm not mad at the Bulls keeping their heads up and listening to offers, but I do think this, right? You risk the chance of overcompensating for previous mistakes that nothing you do here is going to change the past and the deals that you missed out in the past. Make smart deals going forward. Now, I'm not saying that if the Bulls do move Coby, if they do move Io, that it won't necessarily be a smart move. You have some doubt, of course, because we've been fans of this front office. This front office hasn't always made the best moves, but there's a route in which that could be the case, right? We heard that they're open more than ever to moving Patrick Williams. Like, all signs are pointing towards this Bulls team really being open to making some harsh changes at the trade deadline this year. In a lot of ways, they may be looking to do kind of the opposite of what they did when they took over this team. To go back to the first year AK and Eversley came here, right? They talked about building organically through the draft, going younger, right? And then they turned around and traded for Nikola Vucevic, which was an older player. They trade off Daniel Gafford, Chandler Hutchinson. A lot of players, Larry Markkinen was moved in that offseason. And you ultimately, you accelerated your time frame, right? And so I look at this team and I say, this team isn't that far off from being right where they have been the last couple of years, even depending on how they hit with that top 10 pick. If you do still have Coby, if you do still have Io, if you do still have P. Will, if you do still have some of these pieces and you add a top 10 pick and Modest Bucelis and this potential next top 10 pick really grow and develop, yeah, you're right back there. And then rather than be there with 30-year-old players, you're there now with 20 to 25-year-old players, which that's an ascending team, whereas before it was a descending team, right? And so it's a lot of moving parts. And I think overall, the fear that I have, and it's just my own personal fear with this team, is that, all right, what if you do overcompensate? What if you do trade a Coby? Excuse me. What if you do trade a Coby and then he ends up going to another team and really excelling? What if you do trade at Io and Io becomes this consistent two-way monster, right? And then you look at it and you've increased your chance to keep your top 10 pick, and you keep your top 10 pick, but you have no players around that top 10 pick. Because keep in mind, the Bulls got to thread a needle here, because it's not like if they just keep their pick this year, future picks don't go to the Spurs. So if you go too far into being bad, right, and you keep your top 10 pick this year, but let's say, hey, then you've moved Zach, you've moved LaVine, you've moved one of Coby or Io, right? And you have a bad pick again next year, you still owe a pick to the San Antonio Spurs, which is top 6 protected in 2026 and 27. So the Bulls are in a position where, yes, this year you may want to maximize the chances to keep that pick. That's great. But you don't want to be too far off from being in the run for at least a play-in spot after that, if you do commit to that, because then maybe you can keep your pick, right? So let's say the Bulls in 2025, let's say that this year goes, they keep their top 10 pick. 2025, you compete for a play-in. Let's say you barely miss out on the play-in or you get eliminated in the play-in. All right, cool. You'll probably have a top 15 pick at that point that's not top 6, and then you end up adding another talent to this team. So that's what the Bulls, it's not as simple and straightforward as some people make it out to be. It's not as hard. It's not as easy either. Like, the Bulls just have to thread this needle, and it's going to take a vision from this front office to really get it done and be in a place where it's not hurting your team in the future, right? And that is what the really good front office is doing. I know some people are going to say, well, Haize, this front office hasn't been a really good front office, and I'm not here telling you that you're wrong. But I am here to tell you that if you want to be a really good front office in this league, if you want to be a front office that's going to finally some sustainable success and that you can build off on, this trade deadline is hugely important to that. Because if you get it right at this trade deadline and you keep your top 10 pick, and then you hit on that pick, right? There's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of scenarios in here. You hit on that top 10 pick. You develop these young guys. You have a young core now. You could be in a position where you keep your pick for the next 2 years with the Spurs, like, unless you do, if you do get a right outside the lottery pick or a lottery pick, as long as you don't fall, jump into the top 4 and then it turns into the top 6 pick, You got the chance to add some really nice young talent over the next couple of years to the young talent you already have here. And we'll just see where that goes with the Chicago Bulls team. But we're also going to talk about keeping the talent up next, and that is Billy Donovan. Should Billy Donovan maintain and stay on the Chicago Bulls through this next phase of whatever this Bulls team is going to look like? We're going to talk about that. But first, we got to get into a message from BetterHelp. The holidays are coming around, and while the holiday times are filled with a lot of joy, seasonal depression around this time is at an all-time high for a lot of people as well. So how do you stay cozy in the winter months? For some, wrapping up in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate and watching a movie with the family is the best way to spend the month of December. Therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out the brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. You guys know I'm a big proponent of mental health, and it's nothing wrong with you to seek out, therapy. It actually is a sign that things are going right and that you actually have a good grasp on what's going on in life. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA, and tell them Locked On Bulls sent you. More Locked On Bulls coming up next. All right, Bulls fans, man, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, making this your first listen every single day. With that said, man, let's go ahead and get into this next topic that I have. Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan is a hot button topic for a lot of Bulls fans, and I understand why. It's not one of these situations where I don't understand why Billy Donovan's such a hot button topic for some people, because that's just the way it tends to go with Billy Donovan. Like, some people look at Billy Donovan and they say, hey, Billy should be a lot better off at how he coaches this team. Development, he's not playing Montes Vucevic, all these type of things. And while Billy Donovan, is one of the best college coaches of all time. Like, what he was able to do in Florida, it's great, and it may be what gets him in the basketball Hall of Fame, because keep in mind it's not an NBA Hall of Fame. But the questions are there about Billy Donovan, the lack of development he's brought here, and it's really such an interesting thing to really look at for a coach that in college, your job is developing these young players, is getting them ready for the NBA. And that's what Billy Donovan really excelled at during his time in Florida. And the fact that his time here with the Chicago Bulls, it's been a really mixed bag, right? Really mixed bag. Kobe's had his best seasons under Billy Donovan. Ayo Dosunmu played right away. He's had, of course, his best years under Billy Donovan. But then you have the Montes Vucevic, who's not playing. You got Patrick Williams, who I kind of blame the Patrick Williams thing more on Patrick's own mindset than Billy Donovan. But again, some people are going to look at that. You have Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, who, up until this year haven't really played. Well, Julian played a lot his rookie year until he went down. But Dalen Terry not playing a lot his first 2 years, getting some substantial minutes this year. If the Bulls truly do move into this phase of going younger, prioritizing youth, prioritizing developing, needing to develop these young guys, right? Is Billy Donovan the guy to do that? That's a big question here. And there have been some things that I do think are unfairly thrown towards Billy Donovan, but a lot of the criticism that Billy Donovan gets is completely valid, because Billy Donovan is the guy, like, especially when you paint it in the sense of who was a finalist. Ime Udoka was a finalist here for the Bulls head coaching role. And then when Billy Donovan became available, the Bulls focused on Billy Donovan because he was a guy who's done it at college level. He won some with OKC, right? And it just, I don't think it's all on Billy, because Billy's constantly been given extremely flawed roster that's missing some key important things if you really want to be a winning team at the NBA level. But at the same time, like, you got to look at it like having one of the most successful coaches in NCAA history is great and is good, right? He came into the league. He was fighting for the playoffs with the OKC Thunder. He's done that mainly here. They've been trying through the play-in and things like that. But Billy Donovan's flaws here, and while Billy is in with the Reinsdorfs, and that was something that always, to me, was a sign that Billy Donovan was going to be here, Billy has adapted well. And I'm not somebody, look, again, I'm not a Billy Donovan guy, but I am somebody who's fair. And when you look at how Billy Donovan has adapted to the different stages that this Bulls roster has been in, when he first came here, being a coach that said he didn't want to go through a rebuild in OKC to come here for this young team that was initially an evaluation period first. They evaluated, they made a lot of moves. They bring in Vooch, then you bring in Lonzo, you bring in DeMar in the subsequent offseason, you move Lauri Markkanen. And then you're getting to this place of now, okay, we've built this team around, Zach LaVine. We've brought in these pieces that are supposed to help with that. Let's go out here and now try to win, right? Then Lonzo goes down. Then you immediately kind of go to the place where you're still trying to keep afloat. But players like Patrick Williams and Ayo, who've come along over that time, you're still trying to develop those guys. So Billy Donovan has adapted as far as to the personnel that's changed every single year, those type of things, the style of play now that we moved into this year. Like, that is a big step. There's not a lot of coaches that could coach a completely different style than what they had been the last 3 years. And it's not seamless, but done it at the level that they've done it. But then the thing you have to ask yourself, it all comes back to the development piece. And I personally looked at the Bulls bringing in Wes Unseld Jr. and Dan Craig is bringing in two guys that had been heads of player development, have been in charge of developing players that turned into all-stars and MVPs, right? As, all right, Billy's still the guy, but, we see that it's a shortcoming here. Let's go ahead and bring in these other guys, right? And that can help with where Billy's shortcoming is. But I think ultimately, like, if this Bulls team really does go, and keep in mind, I said in the last segment, this team can go from this season trading off pieces to keep a top 10 pick to being a team that, again, can compete for a play-in spot, maybe right after a year, right? And you have to ask yourself, if and when you do move on from Billy Donovan, which I still think is the right move. I look at guys like Chris Quinn that's out there. I look at guys like Shaka Smart if he wants to come to the NBA level. I look at guys around this league that could be ready for that next opportunity. And sometimes you just need a new, fresh set of eyes on things. And that's the question that you have to ask yourself. If you have any doubt that Billy Donovan is the guy to develop these young guys, to me, the Bulls can't afford to keep him. That's my personal opinion on this. The Bulls cannot afford to keep Billy Donovan if development truly is the purpose, because Billy Donovan relies on veterans. Billy Donovan wants to win now. And maybe Mark Eversley does move on and Billy Donovan moves into the front office. Maybe Billy Donovan moves into moves into the front office regardless, and he's an advisor or whatever it is. Whatever the future holds for Billy Donovan, there's still a chance that he's here for the Bulls. And I know that's going to cause my boy Winton some stress there, but there is a chance of that because this front office, this ownership group loves Billy Donovan. But I do think you owe it to the players to ask yourself, who's the best person to usher in the next phase of what needs to happen here? And I think every coach has a finite amount of time with any roster. And I think that sometimes not every coach is meant to see a roster out through every phase of its existence. That's just my personal opinion. And that may be where this has to go with Billy Donovan as well. But the question, I'm going to throw this one to you guys. I would love to hear from you guys on this one. Can the Bulls really afford to keep Billy Donovan if they're going to go this route of truly going younger and prioritizing development? Do you think that he could be the guy to do that? Is it that you have to clear out the veterans? You have to clear out the Zachs. You have to clear out the Vooches. You have to clear out the Torrey Craigs. You have to clear out these guys to force Billy Donovan to play these young guys and develop them. And then if that's the case, is he still going to be right to do that? Is that going to be the best thing where he's going to be happy at as well? Because that's the thing that you have to look at this as well. Like, you don't want to have a Detroit Pistons situation with Monty Williams where you have a coach here that you wanted, but that just didn't believe in your roster and thus didn't really get anything out of it. It ended up hurting. You lost a year of potential development because of that, right? There's a ton of questions. It's not as linear as what we like to think of it as fans. It just isn't. Would I like it to be? Yeah. I mean, I would love to just have this answer and say that we got the coach here that's going to develop these guys, that's going to get these guys where they need to be. We're going to be okay in 3 years, but we don't really have that information to say. And I think also you have to hold a coach accountable. Now, the front office also needs to hold themselves accountable for the lack of size, the lack of shooting that we had in prior years, the lack of rim protection that we've had every year. You need to hold yourself accountable. But Billy Donovan's record has technically gotten worse every year he's been the coach of the Chicago Bulls. And to me, that you have to also look at as well and factor that part into it, at least a little bit. Like, I understand if you want to give some bail, but you got to factor it in at least a little bit. at least in my opinion. But you guys, as always, can let me know how you feel on that one down below. Next up, we're going to be talking about Zach LaVine making Chicago Bulls history when he passed Kirk Hinrich on the all-time three-point shooting list. And how much longer will he actually hold on to that record? Because Coby White has a really good chance of passing him up in a lot less time than it took Zach LaVine. So we're going to talk about all that. But first, we got to get into the message from FanDuel. All right, y'all. You guys know FanDuel has been one of the consistent sponsors here at Locked On Network. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I've been telling you guys that FanDuel's giving you guys a leg up to be able to get everything that you need to make an informed bet and a quick bet all on one page. So you don't have to go to ESPN. You don't have to go to Pro Football Focus. You don't have to go to all these places to get all this information that you need to make an informed bet. You can get it all on the same page where you place your bets, and FanDuel is giving you that tool right there on their website. You just got to visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More Locked On Bulls coming up next. All right, Bulls fans, man, thank you guys for tuning in and staying locked in with us, man. You guys already know you are my favorite part of this whole game, and I appreciate you guys for all the support you give Locked On Bulls every single day. With that said, though, we miss history in talking about Zach LaVine passing up Kirk Hinrich on the all-time Bulls three-point shooting list. And, this is a really good occasion. They posted a picture after the game with the signed ball. He now has 1,051 all-time three-pointers made. That's 2 more than Kirk Hinrich. And when you look at Zach LaVine and the scorer that he's been with the Chicago Bulls, the fact that he is so much and Zach LaVine is part of so much offensive history for the Chicago Bulls. Now, Kirk Hinrich still is high on the list as far as three-point shooting attempts. He's actually #1 there. Zach LaVine's about 70 away, a little less than 70 away from that on that list. You look at the overall 2-point field goals made as well. Zach LaVine has not actually gotten into the top 10 of that list yet, but that's going to come probably sooner rather than later as well. But Zach LaVine has had scoring-wise, what he's brought to the Chicago Bulls offensively for his career. He's one of the best offensive Chicago Bulls players that we've ever seen. And the fact that he's done it on way less games played, like Kirk Hinrich has played 748 games in the Chicago Bulls uniform, which is the third most of any Chicago Bull ever. Zach LaVine isn't even in the top 10 of games played for the Chicago Bulls. Taj Gibson's number 10 with 562. Zach LaVine's not even there yet. So Zach's done it in a great amount of time. And again, the era has changed. There's more three-point shooting. Naturally, somebody's going to break that record, and it was Zach LaVine. But then you got to look at the fact that Coby White, who also isn't in the top 10 list, he's already had 838 three-pointers made in his career. And when you look at Coby White, especially the first 2 years after Billy Donovan came, where he wasn't really shooting too well, and how Coby White's ascending. If Coby White signs another contract, keep in mind his contract's up at the end of next year. If he signs another contract with the Chicago Bulls, there's no doubt that Coby White is going to pass up Zach LaVine as the #1 three-pointers made in the Chicago Bulls uniform. It's academic at this point if he re-signs with the Chicago Bulls long term. So, Zach LaVine has that record for now. He's still in the Bulls uniform. He's still going to put those up. But if he is moved at the trade deadline, that record's going to be broken sooner rather than later. Now, Zach does stay here throughout most of this contract that he's on. He's going to get to push that even further. But Coby White is right on the heels there. Right on the heels. And I would not be surprised at all if we're talking about in 3 seasons, Coby White actually passed this. If it even takes that long for Coby White to be 100% honest with you, really depends on Coby White's consistency, Coby White's health and things like that. But, Coby White has the chance to pass that record up. But Zach LaVine and him making history in the Chicago Bulls uniform, man, it's hats off to him for what he's been able to do over his career. Because, while, like I said, the era has changed, there's way more three-point shooting done right now. And, you got to look at that. But, it's really good what he's been able to do. And just for example, to highlight how Coby White can really Coby White made 209 3-pointers last year. He's made 69 so far this year. But if Coby White makes another 200, he's going to be right there. If he makes another 200 this year, he's going to be right there. And he's probably going to pass Kirk Hinrich up as number 2 next season. So, this is just great that we're seeing history be made for the Chicago Bulls, because we definitely aren't making any histories with wins. So we might as well celebrate the players that have done it. So I want to spend some time on the end of the show just congratulating Zach LaVine on what he's able to do. But yeah, Coby's right there. He's trying to pass you up, young fella. But thank you guys for tuning in, man. Make sure you guys are following the show at Locked On Bulls, guys. You guys can follow me if you choose to do so at CEO Haize. But Locked On Bulls is free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube, the Odyssey app, Amazon Fire TV. If you need Locked On Bulls, we're there. So make sure you guys look out and check out for us there. I'll be live after the game tomorrow, man. So, hey, stay in tune with us. Love you guys. Go Bulls. See red, y'all. Peace.